This is a podcast or something like that. Hello and welcome to the Verbal Journal Podcast, episode 47, a 47th episode in the series. And now, get ready for the episode starting now. Hello and welcome to the 47th episode of the Verbal Journal Podcast. It's kind of redundant, the introduction. The pre-introduction and the post-introduction are a little bit similar. I just noticed that. Welcome to the show. Today's Sunday, December 31st, 2023. That's right. It is New Year's Eve. It's the morning of New Year's Eve, and it's one of the most exciting mornings. To celebrate, I have a lot to talk about. I have tons of fun things that I've been collecting throughout the week, looking forward to talking about with you and you and you and you. First of all, the last Verbal Journal Podcast episode did huge numbers. I can't see how many people listen on Patreon, I don't think. I don't look at that stat. I don't think that's a stat. But I can see how many people listen on YouTube, because I posted on, for YouTube members and then for Patreon supporters who don't want to use Patreon. And the previous episode 46, has 13 views. That is astronomical for the Verbal Journal Podcast. We are used to getting 2 views, 3 views. And these are listens, obviously. I'm saying views, but they're listens. It's a little bit complicated. But 13, that is some huge numbers. We're getting comments on the Patreon. That might have been 2 episodes ago. We're getting comments. We're getting numbers. It is just, things are really taking off. And next week is obviously going to be the public episode number 2. So that's very exciting. I'm not sure that I'll have anything to talk about. We'll see how things go. But I always seem to have things to talk about. And actually, I probably will, because things will continue happening. But thank you for I want to thank the Academy for my huge numbers on the previous episode. Thanks. Okay. Oh, this is exciting. So early on in the podcast, I would sometimes see movies. And speaking of New Year's, it was my 2023 resolution to see more movies. I didn't. I probably did more than 2022, but I didn't see that many movies. I did see a freaking movie this past week. And I'm not even joking in my tone of voice. It is so rare. I don't even watch movies at home, on my TV. I didn't have a TV for years, but now I've had one for 5 years, and I still, I watch it every day. I watch just sports in the background while I'm painting, but I don't watch movies much. So I will say I watched a movie. I watched Poor Things, that new movie that came out, Poor Things. So I went to the movie theater, and I saw Poor Things. It was really interesting. I did see it with my whole family, and it does have a lot of sex scenes. There's sort of comical sex scenes, so luckily it could have been worse, but they're also really, really disturbing sex scenes for other reasons. And I found the movie a little confusing. I don't know if you've seen Poor Things. If you haven't and you want to, if you haven't seen it, maybe jump forward a few minutes in the podcast, or I'll just talk about it for just jump forward a few minutes. You don't even have to, but yeah. So the whole premise is she's, this is I'm sure in the trailer, I didn't watch the trailer, but the protagonist is a sort of a Frankenstein monster where she's been brought back to life. Okay. So she has this second go at life, but she has to relearn everything because she's been brought back to life. I won't spoil everything, but she's technically, mentally, she has the brain of a 1-year-old when we first meet her or something. It's not clear exactly how long ago she was brought back to life, but she has the brain of a toddler, literally. And so then when she's having sex a few scenes later, it's extremely disturbing. And it wasn't clear to me how much the director and the film wanted you to be disturbed, because there was this strange intermixing of comedy. It was almost like a comedy film. There were even times where I genuinely felt the jokes were confusing and distracted from the story, as much as I like jokes. And there were times where people in the theater were clearly fooled by things that were not meant to be jokes. Because of how many jokes there were, people would laugh and react at things that were very clearly not meant to be jokes. And that's not their fault. That's the film's fault. So I thought that was a little weird. And I was very, very disturbed watching this character who was supposed to, have a toddler's brain having sex. And I mean, it was also very disturbing because, they're like, it's just like, anyways, that was very disturbing. But at the end of the day, it is a story of that character's sort of empowerment and independence. And like, I understand that they develop their sexuality as part of that, but it is very sort of emotionally confusing as the viewer to immediately be told this is literally a child and then watch them having sex. It's like, but the weird thing was the sex scenes were still like played for laughs. They were like over the top and stuff, and like the way the protagonist talked about sex was clearly like from another planet / how someone who didn't understand sex would talk about sex. It just was weird. I didn't really feel like that was resolved, that conflict between, oh, it's a child, oh, it's not a child. I thought that I don't know. I go to movies. It's the same with stand-up. Like, I go to stand-up. People in the audience can just, like, suspend their critical disbelief or their, like, judgment in ways that I can't. I still very much enjoyed the film, but I was sort of pondering, like, what were they trying to do here? Or did they realize how uncomfortable they're making it? Or did they not? If you saw the film, okay, skip forward 30 seconds if you didn't see the film. I'm going to do another quick spoiler. So if you saw the film, the one joke that I felt like really crossed the line, not even it's not offensive, but they did, like, it was totally inappropriate timing for the joke and it really didn't work, was like, okay, really spoiler alert. So like right towards the end, when she's about to get married to like the nice guy, which by the way, is he really a nice guy? He was fucking okay having sex with her when he knew that she was literally the brain of a toddler, but he's supposed to be the nice guy in the movie. Like, it literally makes no sense. Like, oh, he's such a nice guy and he doesn't care that he's fucking marrying a toddler. So anyways, okay, 30 more seconds. Fuck, the spoiler people wouldn't hear me say 30 more seconds. So anyways, she's getting married to him. It's like sort of the happy ending or whatever. But then her old husband from before, she, from her old life, like comes and breaks through the door, and he's, gets her to come back to his life. But before he does, he draws an analogy for how he's like killed people on the battlefield. He's like a soldier or whatever. And then he draws an analogy for how he disembowels people on the battlefield and he made them empty. And he felt a similar emptiness when she left. And then he's like, and then there's this like joke line where he's like, but people on the battlefield will often like, shit, but that doesn't account in this metaphor. Or like he phrased it funnier, and he was just like taking the metaphor far enough. Like, it was a joke like I would make like on the podcast. Like, you're comparing two things and then you jokingly, point out a way that they're not compared. It really was strange. It was a strange tone in that scene. It's not even like, it was an emotional scene. It was also funny. There were jokes in the scene and stuff, but it was like, it didn't make sense for him to be so like, sort of like in his own head making such a joke like that for an audience of himself. Like, it was just like clearly not, it didn't fit the tone. And so it was just an odd thing. And I was like, wow, it really felt like they brought in people to punch up the script comedically, and it was not necessary. They were like just jokes injected in ways that they're not necessary. I think it's the same director as The Lobster though, and it definitely shows. But it's not as serious as The Lobster. Lobster was funny too though. I was talking with a family member, we were remembering it was funny too, but Less forced, it felt like. Anyways, Poor Things was good. There were a few things that I think it was based on a book. I wondered how the book did certain things. So yeah. I mean, because there was like a point where like she sees all these poor people and it's like, oh, what's it going to be like for her to interact with poor people? Like people who are struggling, like she's this princess, like so interesting to see. And then she doesn't fucking interact with them. The plot finds this other way around. It's like, okay, kind of, that was, you were just building that up. Okay, whatever. Anyways, it was a good movie. I recommend it. But hey, I saw a movie. How about that? That's pretty cool, right? Okay, next up on the agenda, the verbal journal agenda. The verbal agenda. So what I've been doing for the last like 6 months is reading biographies of artists, and I've been talking about it a lot on the podcast. What I remembered this past week is that actually some of the first books I ever got into were biographies. Like when I was like, I don't remember, like 12, 13, 11, or 10 or something. I actually, you like read growing up, you learn to fucking read. People teach you to read. You're like, okay, I'm sure I'm going to use this when I'm older. And it's like, so you learn to read, but then there's like the ages where you actually get into reading and you find things you're interested in. And, that happened at a few points in my life. When I was older, like in high school, it happened again with like Hubert Selby Jr.'s book, Last Exit to Brooklyn, after reading like Requiem for a Dream and his book, like Waiting Period. I think Requiem for a Dream got me into his other books because I saw the movie, and then also No Country for Old Men. Got me into Cormac McCarthy's books. But a few years before that, I got into reading also, and I realized it was biographies. It was an Einstein biography for kids and a Houdini biography for kids. I definitely remember the Houdini, and I'm pretty sure there was an Einstein one too. But yeah, I remember reading those, and it's so interesting to me that I really liked biographies back then. But now I just love them. I just fucking love them. I was talking last week about reading the Cy Twombly biography. I was learning all about Cy Twombly, famous, legendary, abstract, expressionist artist, very unique style, scrawling, scribblings, writing, pinching, poking, stabbing, symbols, like not everybody's cup of tea, not even necessarily my cup of tea, but very interesting guy, interesting to learn about his life. And I actually read the whole fucking book. I read this 400-page book in like 2 weeks. So, I'm just flying through these artist biographies. I finished the Pollock one before the Twombly one. Now I'm done with the Twombly one, and I'm reading a Man Ray biography. So Man Ray is fascinating. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really hoping that I like Man Ray more than Cy Twombly. I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to like him more. Cy Twombly, I would say, is more selfish than the average person, was more selfish than the average person. I don't particularly find him to be someone he didn't seem to care about other people very much. He wasn't in any way socially engaged, like in terms of social justice. He wasn't, he like lived in Italy in the 60s. And then like when things got too political, he like left. And that's not the only example. Like, just like he would say things, like he said something like, oh, I haven't picked up my phone in years. If I want to talk to someone, I call them. And I'm just thinking like, I wonder if there's a problem with that, you motherfucking idiot. Like, yeah, I get if you hear something like that and you're like, oh, goals, like, I want to live like that. Like, but your fucking friends and family don't want you to live like that. People want to be able to call you. And if it's like, and then there were these anecdotes of like him just like not wanting to be supportive or really helpful when people like could have used a little support or help on the phone or this or that or in person. And he just doesn't seem like he had like falling outs with people for the dumbest reasons. Fucking he handwrites a letter to Jasper Johns. Jasper Johns typewrites a letter back. And Cy Twombly's hurt for years over it. Like, get fucking over yourself, dude. Like, he had a falling out with Robert Rauschenberg, too, because he went to visit Robert Rauschenberg on his, like, island, Captiva Island, like, off of Florida. And they're, like, hanging out. And then, like, it's for Thanksgiving dinner, and Rauschenberg, like, cooks this whole meal, and Twombly doesn't show up. It's like, dude, have you been in Italy too long? We celebrate Thanksgiving over here in the States. fuck you. No, I think he's selfish. I think most artists I think you have to be a little selfish to be an artist. I mean, you have to be selfish to be a human, but you have to be a little when I say selfish, I mean like net putting your own wants over other people's more serious wants or needs. And it's all relative. So when I say he's selfish, I just mean he's more selfish, way more selfish than he should have been. I was talking about some confusion I had last time because I'm reading, and he's like, he had this relationship with Robert Rauschenberg. He like had this relationship with this younger guy, but he never separated from his wife. Well, separated, he did. They lived apart for years, but yeah, he never formally divorced. He also never talked about his sexuality in public, which is totally understandable and fine. It's kind of fucked up to say, but like, they call them these blue chip artists, like the artists who sell for like millions of dollars, like which he did during his lifetime. It took decades, but he did get there. You can't, unfortunately, get to that point decades ago, and maybe even today if you're openly gay. Like, it actually makes it harder for your career. So I understand staying in the closet. It's everyone's right to do what they want to do in that regard. It's just sad to think about that he was that he was like it's one thing to, like, he was never ever public with his affection in any way towards the guy that he was with and the guy who has survived him and become the head of his foundation and everything. So here's what's crazy though. The book I read, the fucking biography, okay? They meet up with this younger guy, Nicola, who became the head of the foundation, who was Cy Twombly's lover, administrator, archivist, assistant, everything. And so what was I saying? So yeah, so the author meets up with Nicola and like finally gets this meeting with this like kind of mysterious not reclusive, but like it's hard to get a meeting with this guy unless you have business with the Cy Twombly Foundation, which, a biographer sort of does, but it sort of doesn't. The foundation's in total control. They can meet or not meet. They can do whatever they want. They meet. It's tense. Nicola's asking the author more questions about him than giving a chance to the author to ask questions about Nicola or Cy Twombly. So it's like, it's a whole thing. And then he asks the author to send him like a sample of his writing, and then Nicola takes issue with it. This one point about how Twombly interacted with his driver in Lexington, Virginia when he moved back, and Nicola's like, oh, he was more generous than you're saying, and he gave these statues to his driver. And it becomes this thing, and like Nicola meets up with the author again like months later, and then they talk more, and like it's tense, but it's not that bad. And then Nicola just threatens like implicitly to not give the foundation's rights to the author and not let the author use any images of Cy Twombly's work or photographs that the foundation has the rights to. And that's a big deal for a biography. And that's when I realized, oh yeah, there are no photos of Cy Twombly's art in this entire book. It was something I noticed when I first picked up the book, but I didn't really think of it because I'm just like, okay, I'm always annoyed they never have enough pictures of the work for me. So what's the difference between not having enough and not having any? But that's when it comes back to me, when Nicola implicitly threatens to not give the foundation's permission to the book. Oh yeah, there's no fucking images of Cy Twombly's work in this biography of Cy Twombly. So I go to the back, I look at the image credits. There's not even any photographs that the credits are to the foundation, the Cy Twombly Foundation. Keep reading on, and the fucking author even got a legal threat from the foundation. The foundation had their lawyers contact the author and threaten to sue and get a signed statement from the driver from Virginia saying that he didn't remember saying those things to the author. So the author had to fucking get a lawyer too. And the author took notes during his conversation with the driver, and the author said, look, I'm not trying to cause problems, but I'm just writing my book, and this is what happened, and I wrote about it, and you're not going to tell me not to do it. So anyways, I realized that the biography didn't even have the permission of the foundation, which is so badass. And the author makes this point, like, look, if a foundation is closed to the public, it's closed to the public. But if you're going to give out Cy Twombly's private love letters to one person, and you're going to give out his paintings to that person and another person, and then you're not going to give out his letters and paintings to another person just because you don't like them. That's just kind of ridiculous. I'm sorry. That's not the... I don't know that a foundation needs to be doing that. The book raises the question very explicitly. Is a foundation named after an artist protecting that artist's legacy, is that enough? Or should the foundation be inherently doing more than simply protecting the legacy and growing the brand of the artist? Should it be stimulating more young artists with the money, which I think the Twombly Foundation is starting to do, and so on. Anyways, fascinating book. One thing I didn't mention last week also, and this is really interesting. The book is written by a poet. It's a poet. So the author is a poet, was a poet, is a poet. And it makes a lot of sense because Cy Twombly was a big fan of poetry, used a lot of lines of poetry in his work. But what's also very interesting about this biography is it's clearly written by a poet. There are enormous chunks of it, sprinkled throughout that are written poetically. The author will use language in a way clearly different from prose. Go out of his way to imagine what Cy Twombly was experiencing. The author went to all the locations Cy Twombly lived, basically, and would actually go places and say, oh, I'm imagining Cy walking down here, seeing this, seeing that. And I don't have quotes to read. I already gave the book back. But it's really the sun turning brown, the sunlight turning orange across the window pane, sprinkling light through the windows into the, and really painting pictures, I guess is the best way to put it. And it was very interesting, and it actually allowed me to skim a lot of it because I really wasn't interested in some of that. I really wasn't, especially once I realized I didn't particularly like Cy Twombly. I didn't need to get into his head. And also there were extended descriptions of the artwork that I didn't need. And it's very funny if you look up Cy Twombly's artwork because a lot of it looks very similar, and I'm not trying to take a dig at it. I think I'm glad he did that artwork. No one else has to do it anymore. He influenced people, he influenced Basquiat. He influenced a lot of people. He's very interesting in his ability to do whatever the fuck he wanted. But I don't trust him. There were a few times where Cy Twombly seemed to lie to the public. Oh, I didn't, just tell stories about his life in a misleading way. Anyways, what was I saying? So yeah, it's just written very poetically. So that's interesting. And the Man Ray biography I just started is written by a poet as well, but it's not clearly written poetically yet at all. It's a totally different approach. So very interesting Cy Twombly biography that wasn't authorized by the estate and was written poetically. And wow, I learned a lot. So I'm hoping to, I'll be back continuing to talk about artist biographies, and I hope you enjoy that. On to the next thing. Speaking of the biography I read before, I was talking about Jackson Pollock, and I learned in this biography that Pollock apparently asked Twombly when they met for the first time, because they both lived in New York and stuff, so they met for the first and last time. Pollock said, "And what is it that you do?" Apparently, Robert Rauschenberg had a similar interaction with Pollock, so Pollock enjoyed just asking artists, "And what is it that you do?" And I think he knew. I think he knew that they were painters and still asked that, which is really funny. To know that someone's a painter and still say, "And what is it that you do?" That's really funny. Also, one thing regarding Pollock is I mentioned he was sober for 2 years. One really fascinating detail there, because he struggled so much with alcoholism. He was sober for 2 years. He relapsed directly the night of, after painting this famous thing, because he was being filmed for the first time painting by Hans Nemeth. It's a famous film in the history of art and art history. In the history of art and abstract expressionism. So the Hans Nemeth film of Jackson Pollock, they filmed it. Pollock was painting on glass, so Nemeth could film from below as well. It's this famous film. Pollock goes inside and pours himself whiskey. Hadn't drank in 2 years. And everyone was like, "Don't do it, dude." And then he did it. got so drunk he flipped over the dining room table with like 10 guests there with their food not eaten yet. Ruined the night. This happened. Also, Pollock's psychiatrist who had helped him with his alcoholism had just died. So it's just very sad, but it just goes to show like kind of how difficult it can be for people to stay sober. And they have to be always vigilant to cravings that can come from emotionally stressful situations. Continuing on our journey through the art world, I was thinking a bit about the Surrealists, and I was reading a little bit about Freud and the Surrealists. I don't remember exactly how I got to it, but I remembered this story from reading about Salvador Dali of him meeting Sigmund Freud. And I remembered there was an interesting quote, but I forgot about it, so I looked it up. And it was Freud saying to Dali in classic. So they meet up, and Dali shows him his art and talks about how his art is inspired by the subconscious and Freud's work. And the Surrealists loved Freud, like they were obsessed with him, especially like even like Andre Breton. I think that's how you pronounce it. Famous surrealist, like founding surrealist, like showed up randomly to Freud's house. Apparently, I just found out like when I was looking this stuff up, he just showed up to Freud's house one day and like tried to talk to Freud, and Freud was like, "I don't want to talk," and then he like hated Freud after that. So surrealists had what we call a parasocial relationship with Freud. Anyway, Dali met Freud after that Andre Breton stuff. So Freud was a little bit hesitant, but like a friend of Freud's had like bought a famous painting of Dali, so they had some connection. Maybe a friend of a friend. But when they met and Dali showed him his art, Freud said, "In classic paintings, I look for the unconscious, but in your paintings, I look for the conscious," which apparently Dali took to be criticism. But the next day, Freud wrote to his friend who brought the visitors, "I really have reason to thank you for the introduction which brought me yesterday's visitors, for until then I was inclined to look upon the Surrealists, who have apparently chosen me as their patron saint, as absolute, let us say 95% like alcohol, cranks. That young Spaniard, however, with his candid and fanatical eyes and his undeniable technical mastery, has made me reconsider my opinion." So it's pretty interesting. But I also just love that comment he made to Dali, that he, in most paintings, he looks for the unconscious, but in Dali's paintings, he looks for the conscious. I guess, yeah, that really, I guess what I like about that is like, I can't paint like Dali, obviously. I can't really paint very realistically. So I have to like work around that. And I try to think that it could be a good thing, because there does strike me as something a little bit odd about like portraying the unconscious in such explicit symbolic ways. It's sort of like when, like, as Dali does and the surrealists do sometimes, like, I mean, there's all different types of surrealists, and I think I talked about this with Pollock. Like, if you look at he was a surrealist in some capacity, like a mixture of like a Picasso surrealist, sort of like before he went into the drip paintings, and that's very different than Dali's surrealism. It's not these like photorealistic, like chiaroscuro paintings. It's symbolic. It's primal looking, but it's really not sort of surreal in the same way. I'm not gonna say which I like more, because they're both different, but I do feel that there's some sort of drawback to trying to. Nah, I'm just coping. Never mind. I don't know. I feel like there's some drawback to trying to like photorealistically portray things that are symbols. But no, I'm just coping. At the end of the day, I just think it's interesting that you can look for realistic. You can look for unconscious or conscious sort of things, and the idea that Dali worked so hard to make the unconscious visible, so it's not even interesting to look at it as the unconscious anymore. At that point, he's so conscious about the unconscious that really you have to try to look at what he's not conscious of, which is the consciousness. Okay. Okay, I have this Bob Odenkirk interview with David Cross that just came out. We're at 16 minutes in. Bob talks about ripping a ligament during take 2 of the scene being chased by the 2 young guys he ends up fighting in Better Call Saul. What am I going to do? Play that clip? I don't want to talk about that. Interesting though. You should look it up. Great interview with David Cross if you're a fan of the Odin Master. New Substack founders respond saying that they don't prevent Nazis from being on their platform. Okay, I don't need to talk about that either. Here's some good news. The Detroit Pistons finally broke a NBA history record losing streak. So 5 days ago, they had their first round draft pick, Cade Cunningham, score 40 points, and they still broke the NBA record for most consecutive games lost. They lost their 27th game that night. Then 2 nights later, I'm sorry. Then 2 nights later, they lost their 28th game in a row. And it was pretty sad. Because they were beating Boston, the NBA's best team, by 19 points. They were beating the NBA's best team by 19 points a few nights ago, and they still lost. But then last night, finally, they snapped their historic 28-game losing streak, and you should see the clip of them winning the game. There's a team has never been so happy to win a regular season game. Let me tell you that. Okay, chess segment. Oh my god, I saved all these links to talk about on the fucking podcast, and there's way too many of them now. I just need to read them all out really quick, just one after the other, and then maybe I'll say something at the end because there's too many of these. I've saved way too many of them. The chess segment is at risk of taking over, and I don't want to save them for next week because I'm sick of looking at this many links. Wow, that's a lot of links. Okay, let's go. One after the other. Anish Giri tweet about Alireza Firouzja farming ELO points right before the end of the year. So this was the drama. Alireza Firouzja trying to get his ELO, his rating above Wesley So's because there's one spot in the candidates tournament available for the highest rating person that year who doesn't qualify through other means. In the candidates tournament, the winner plays the world champion, who is Deng Liren. So everyone wants into the candidates. Alireza planned these last minute tournaments to basically boost his rating. People thought he was farming ratings, so they were upset because he's playing people lower rated, not even competitive games. Do the other people even want to win? Are they paid? Or like, even if they're not paid, do they really want to win? Okay. Wesley So also has terrible politics is part of the news. He apparently likes Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like that. And he's like a fundamentalist who is an idiot outside of chess. And he was kind of posting weird shit on Twitter. He was just being weird on Twitter and liking weird Marjorie Taylor Greene posts. So people were calling him out, and then he was blocking them. He also accused people of cheating in 2017. He accused Alireza of cheating, apparently without evidence. Maybe he had evidence. Who knows? So Firouzja played these games. People resigned to him in even positions. It really did look extremely sketchy. Wesley So deleted his Twitter account because he realized he was smart enough to realize that he didn't belong on Twitter. He can't really hang. Chess24 was purchased by chess.com a long time ago, and chess.com said they were not going to shut it down. Let me play that clip. Sorry if it's loud. Let's see. Oh, no, I can't play the clip. It doesn't matter. If I was recording in Streamlabs, I'd be able to play the clip. It doesn't matter. It's Danny Wrench, the CEO of chess.com, saying, quote, "The future of Chess24 will always be intact," and quote, "We have no intention to shut it down." This is on the Twitter page at Chess Rumors. Well, they shut Chess24 down. So I don't use chess.com. I use Chess24. I use Lichess. Okay, and then apparently Firouzja, because he drew his last game in that tournament, he was not going to make the candidates, but then he played another tournament, and now he is going to play the candidates, probably. I don't know. It's not clear yet. I hope he does, because Wesley So is weird, as I said, and shouldn't be in the candidates. I don't know if they should do it by rating. Maybe they should just do it by politics. Anyways, there was a huge Rapid and Blitz championship that just took place, and my favorite player, Vladislav Artemiev, got third place in the Blitz. Magnus got first, Dubov got second. Dubov and Nepomniachtchi were also punished for blatantly and verbally and audibly arranging a draw in one of their games. Fucking Russians, what can you do? They're famous for arranging draws. Vladislav Artemiev, also Russian, but he is such a fucking badass. I love his playing, and I'm so happy he's rising and rising and rising. I want to see him in some of these major tournaments next year. He won the European individual in 2019, and I just happened to be getting into watching chess at that time. Loved him. I've loved him ever since. He's my favorite player. Okay. We did it. That was all the chess stuff. Okay. Now we're going to look at the screen time report. I don't think we did that last week. My weekly screen time report. I used my phone a daily average of 1 hour and 30 minutes, over 2 hours yesterday and Friday. A lot of Chrome. I've been looking up art on my phone, some messages. Okay. Next segment is the mailbag. This is the last segment. Check the mailbag. You can write into verbaljournalpodcast@gmail.com. Lots of people do. It's a very cool thing to do. And then I read them, and no one wrote in. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. This was a fantastic episode. Everybody's talking about it. Next week is the public episode, so put on your best clothes when you listen to that one. And I will see you there. Catch you then. And there then, and what's the other one? There then, there, location, then time. There then and thy. There then and I think that might just be all you need, space and time, right? Okay.
This is a podcast or something like